A hush falls over Nashville whenever Bobbie Gentry's name is whispered, a silence shaped not by absence, but by a decades-long shadow. She didn't just disappear. She was pushed, silenced, and nearly erased. At 82, Bobbie remains one of country music's most haunting mysteries, not only for vanishing from fame at her peak, but for how her silence was carefully manufactured behind the scenes. Her retreat wasn't a quiet retirement. It was a last stand for survival in an industry that chose control over creativity and obedience over authenticity. Why would a woman who wrote, produced, and performed some of the most unforgettable music of her time suddenly walk away? Why would someone whose talent was so undeniable become invisible so quickly? And what was the cost of standing up to a system that was never meant to let her win? Long before she became a mystery, Bobbie Gentry was a revelation. With her breakout 1967 hit, Ode to Billy Joe, she didn't just top charts. She changed the very sound of storytelling in country music. Her voice carried something different, something real. The song's eerie poetic narrative, laced with southern heat and chilling indifference, proved she was not just a singer, she was a visionary. But her talent wasn't just in her lyrics or melodies. It was in her refusal to be molded. While many of her peers were groomed to play a role, Bobbie insisted on writing her own material, producing her own albums, and refusing to let anyone dictate who she should be. This independence, while admired by fans, was seen as defiance by the powerful men who controlled Nashville's tight-knit world, especially within the Grand Ole Opry. From the outside, the Opry was country music's grand stage, a glittering badge of honor. But behind its curtain was something else entirely. A system of silence, expectation, and control. Bobbie understood this early. She smiled for cameras, stood beneath the lights, and posed for magazines. But in private, she pushed back. She refused to play the sweetheart, or tone down her voice. She demanded to keep her publishing rights, to own her sound, and to speak her truth. And that made her dangerous in a place where women were expected to nod, smile, and obey. Unlike Dolly Parton or Tammy Wynette, Bobbie Gentry was never invited to become a member of the Opry. No official explanation was given. Instead, she was slowly written out. Cancelled appearances, vanishing invitations, whispers of her being unstable or difficult. But the truth didn't lie in those labels. It lay in recently surfaced letters, handwritten and authenticated, where Bobbie describes in heartbreaking clarity how Opry executives tried to pressure her into giving up control. In one letter, she wrote of a meeting where she was told directly, if she didn't hand over her creative rights, her future would disappear. She didn't comply. And so, they made her vanish. Throughout the 1970s, Bobbie kept performing, far from Nashville. She took on Vegas residencies, appeared on television, toured overseas. Yet something inside her was breaking. Backstage at certain events, she overheard her name spoken like a ghost of the past. People talked about her as if she no longer mattered, as if she had peaked and fallen. But she hadn't. She was still creating, still contributing. Only, Nashville had decided to look away. Because she refused to be shaped, she was deemed unworthy. Her refusal to wear suggestive outfits, to lip-sync, or to smile on cue was seen as rebellion. Her insistence on fairness, on contracts, profits, honesty, was treated like a threat. One industry executive once called her a storm in a cocktail dress, beautiful but too powerful. And so they turned their backs. As the Opry celebrated others, throwing anniversary specials, lifetime achievement awards, public honors, Bobbie slipped further into the margins. And then she vanished. No press release, no farewell show. By 1980, she was simply gone. To the public, it seemed like she had chosen a quiet life. But those close to her knew better. She hadn't just walked away. She was escaping. She had been pushed so far so often, that disappearing was the only way to survive with her spirit intact. In private, she began closing all doors. No more interviews, no more shows, no more letters to the industry. Her silence was not surrender. It was protection. Years later, that silence has begun to break. Not with fanfare, but with dignity. Through trusted friends and carefully released writings, Bobbie Gentry has started to share the truth. In one private note, she described the Opry as a velvet prison, beautiful on the outside, but suffocating within. Loyalty, she wrote, was only given to those who complied. And if you didn't, you were cut out. She shared stories of being laughed at in meetings, of songs rejected for being too emotional, and of being told not to write about pain or freedom. The moment she refused to change the lyrics of one of her songs in 1976, she was removed from the lineup the very next day. No explanation. Just gone. Her letters reveal even darker truths, of private dinners that were supposed to be about reconciliation but turned into power plays. In one such meeting, a top executive told her, "We made you, Bobbie, and we can unmake you." That threat stayed with her. It wasn't just about music anymore. It was about her safety, her dignity, her sanity. After that night, she stopped fighting to be seen. She accepted that the Opry, and the system it represented, didn't want her. So, she left it behind. But even in her absence, Bobbie's influence never faded. Her style, her courage, and her storytelling lived on in artists who followed, even if they never said her name. The industry borrowed her ideas, concept albums, bold narratives, genre-bending songs, and gave credit elsewhere. She became the foundation others built upon, yet she was left out of the story. Fans begged for her return. Documentaries were made. Biographers searched for her. But the resistance was real. Powerful figures quietly blocked attempts to revive her legacy, insisting she didn't want to be remembered. That too was a lie. Bobbie never wanted fame on someone else's terms. She didn't want awards from people who once silenced her. What she wanted was honesty. And in her late years, that honesty has arrived. Not in interviews or speeches, but in her own words. She talks now of how the industry twisted her image, how rumors were used like weapons, and how even her personal relationships were manipulated to keep her in check. But through it all, she never gave in. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was strength. She describes those years as a war not of music, but of minds. Her refusal to be molded, to sing certain songs, to perform in certain clothes, all came with a cost. She was made to look like she'd lost her way. But what really happened was simple. She refused to be controlled, and they punished her for it. And still she refused to break. Even after all this, the industry struggles to admit the truth. Tributes are still rare. Opry insiders still avoid her name. And yet, her story is finally being told. Not by the people who erased her, but by Bobbie herself. In her writings, she reflects not with hate, but with clarity. She writes of betrayal, yes, but also of peace. She chose to protect her soul over pleasing an industry that didn't deserve her. She chose to live quietly, rather than loudly conform. Today, when people hear her music, it carries more than melody. It carries the weight of her struggle, the echoes of her courage. She may have been silenced, but her truth is louder than ever. Younger artists who now sing boldly, who own their work, who speak their minds, they walk through a door Bobbie helped crack open, even if her name isn't etched on it. Her legacy is not in awards or honors. It's in the quiet fire she carried, the line she refused to cross, and the life she reclaimed on her own terms. Bobbie Gentry may have disappeared from the stage, but she never disappeared from the fight. Her silence was her weapon. And now, her voice, measured, calm and powerful, cuts through the decades of erasure like a beam of light. In a world where so many are forced to bend to survive, Bobbie stood tall, even if it meant vanishing. She left not in defeat, but in defiance. And now, with her story returning to the light, the world is finally beginning to see her not as a mystery, but as a force. Not as a lost artist, but as a woman who chose truth over applause. If Bobbie Gentry's story moved you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are so many voices like hers that deserve to be heard, not just for their music, but for the courage it takes to stay true.